start directly?
Yeah, you can start.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Should be good. Thank you. It's good. Hare Krishna. Right? Good. I think it should be good. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for coming on a Saturday evening. And I'll just very quickly start with an apology. I was supposed to be here at least 15, 20 minutes before get my breathing normalized before I start talking. But Krishna's arrangement, traffic was so bad, it took me double the time for commute. I missed the RT, unfortunately, and just ran in. The car is still getting parked. So thank you so much. Weekends are special times that you usually spend with your friends and families and everybody. But if you took out the time to spend with us, really appreciate that and welcome. Today's topic, and just dive in right so that we're able to cover time and get some time in for our question and answer sessions, which we really love. We would really like to hear from you all what your experiences have been, what your questions are. So today's topic, art of living. Oh, not living, right? Purposely made similar, but art of leaving. How many of you watch movies? Everybody, that's assumption. Mostly with, when you're starting with movies like Bollywood movies or something, they'd come up with a disclaimer and they would say, any familiarities or similarities with anybody living or dead is just coincidence. It's actually not. It's purposely done, inspired by or copied from some other content. It just used this kind of a disclaimer at the very beginning. So my disclaimer, the art of living, its similarity is intended. When we come towards the end of this talk, we will come to the point of what we want to talk about, the similarity of the phrase that people are used to. We're going to come to that. Before we dive in, when we talk about art, so before we talk about art of living, let's talk about something similar. Art of painting. What is an art of painting? So when you're saying the art of painting, it's the action of you doing something to create an artwork, a paint, which is pleasing, an output that you desire to get, right? So that's the art. The art is essentially you doing something so skillfully that you get the desired result. So if you're saying an art of singing, for example, the art of singing is that you're able to use your vocal cords to present sound vibrations so pleasing that the person listening to it finds satisfaction, is able to connect with you, gets into the mood that you want to set, right? So what would be the art of leaving? So the art of leaving is going to be you leaving in such a way that you get your desired result out of that activity itself. And yes, disclaimer again, when we are saying leaving, we are talking about death. Okay? But talking about death comes with a displeasure or a sorrow that comes associated with it. My apologies, I will touch that. But the art that we are trying to come up to is how to understand this entire phenomena in such a way that we are able to do this art of living in the desired way, such that that experience is not only good for us, it's good for the family, and it's good for the future. Okay? So, let's just remember about all of those loving people that we've lost in the family, right? And despite all our efforts, despite all the desire within our heart that such an act does not happen, it does. The scriptures, the Vedic scriptures, they talk about it. And they talk about the danger of death, that it's unavoidable. Right? So the Bhagavad Gita, for example, it says, one who has taken his birth is sure to die. And after death, one is sure to take birth again. There is like surety over there. There's no doubt about the fact that once you have taken birth, you will die. You can prolong. You can do something to make it look a bit different. You can live your life in a way that the society might term your death as being glorious, or something which could be a sacrifice for the society. Overall, there are different things that you can talk about, but the very act of death is unavoidable. Do we all agree with that? Right? And it's not just that the fact that death is unavoidable. The Vedic scriptures also talk in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the very phrase is used as padam padam yad vipadam, which what basically it means that every step, padam padam, which means every step, there is danger. So what that means is that death is something that is not going to come announcing when it's going to come. It will just come when it has to come, whenever there is time. And I think that is what makes death the most fearful experience overall, right? So the fact that you don't know when you're going to die, that uncertainty, what I'm doing today, and will I be able to finish that or not? The fact that I came to the temple right now, will I be able to reach home or not? Those questions, that uncertainty is what creates fear. But the fear also comes from another aspect of the fact, right? We know the experience of death can be very painful. And the fact is, based on the Vedic scriptures, we have died multiple times before. It's not that we've taken birth for the first time. It's not that we're going to die for the first time. We have had that experience in different shapes and forms multiple times before. So that experience, that impression is there within us. It's there in our consciousness, that experience is not a pleasurable experience. But we don't know the details of it because that's the mercy of Krishna. Now imagine you're remembering, what's the term? PTSD? When somebody is into service, armed services, they experience a very traumatic situation. After that, they take a lot of time to be able to recover from that experience itself. Now, if you remember how you died last, being crushed under something, being shot in the head, something, I don't know what has been our history, but that experience is so traumatic, if you remember that, we'll not be able to lead a life. And that's why Krishna is merciful to help us forget that. Right? So, that impression still remains within us, and that is what causes that fear within us. And that experience is very painful, and the scriptures define that in a lot of details. So, actually, do we have another mic? Any chance? We have, right? Okay. I'm going to open up a couple of verses. We're going to read together from what the scriptures is talking about all of this, and then we're also going to discuss. So I will need volunteers to do a little bit of reading. It's a few lines only, just so that we are able to engage everybody. So the fact that the art of leaving is known to only a few, the experience for most of us is not pleasurable. And the amount that we're going to be feeling the pain during the time when we are acquitted out of this body, so our true identity is that of a soul, right? The body is just temporary. The phenomena of death is that the soul is going to leave the body behind and go on. Is everybody aware of that fact? Anybody who's hearing that for the first time? No? Okay. So that fact being established, now when we board a bus, we take a public transport for example, right? When your stop comes and you get down of that bus, is that a painful experience? Not much. You know it's your stop. You got to get down. You boarded the bus with the intent to reach your destination and get out. But if the place where you're living, if all of a sudden in the middle of the night, somebody knocks at your door and said, out, right now, within this second, you cannot take anything. Is that experience going to be pleasurable? No, because we are attached to that house. The experience of death is fearful or painful because every attachment that we have is like a string. Everything that we identify ourselves with, everything that we say is mine, each of that is a string. And when you're leaving the body, when you're dying, each of that string is going to be broken. And that's what causes pain. Scriptures also define this as being like 42,000 scorpion bites at the time of death. That's the kind of experience scriptures define, but then this experience varies from people to people. It's just one expression of it. It's not like somebody has quantified it some way, it's exactly 42,000 scorpions biting, but that experience for different people are different. Some might feel more pain, some might have it more horrifying experience than the others, just because of how they have lived their life, how much they are attached, how much they are not wanting to go out of that body. Let's first do a little bit of reading, okay? Let's just, do we have a volunteer to do a couple of words reading? So we're going to be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, a few of the translations. So this is going to be 4th canto and 28th chapter. I should have it open. There we go. So do we have a volunteer? That's 428. Yes. We're going to read from verse 22 onwards.
Read from which text?
22, just the translations. These are just the translations from Srimad Bhagavatam. From 22 till 28 is what we're going to read.
Yeah, I
can zoom in. No worries. Sorry.
Okay, 22.
Yes.
Although King Purnajana should have not lamented over the fate of his wife and children, he nonetheless did so due to his misery intelligence. In the meantime, Yavana Raja, whose name was Fear itself, immediately drew near to arrest him. When the Yavanas were taking King Purnajana away from their place, binding him like an animal, the king's followers became greatly aggrieved. When they lamented, they were forced to go along with him. The serpent, who had already been arrested by the soldiers of Yavana Raja and was out of the city, began to follow his master along with the others. As soon as they all left the city, it was immediately dismantled and smashed to dust. When King Purnajana was being dragged with great force by the powerful Yavana out of his gross ignorance, he still could not remember his friend and well-wisher, the super soul. The most unkind King Purnajana had killed many animals in various sacrifices. Now, taking advantage of this, the opportunity, all these animals began to pierce him with their horns. It was as though he were being cut to pieces by axes. Due to his contaminated association with women, a living entity like King Purnajana eternally suffers all the pangs of material existence and remains in the dark region of material life, bereft of all remembrance for many, many years. King Purnajana gave up his body while remembering his wife, and consequently in his next life, he became a very beautiful and well-situated woman. he took his next birth as a daughter of King Vidarbha in the very house of the king.
Thank you so much. So that's how the description is for what happens at the time of death. So these are the verses are actually good analogies that Narad Muni is doing. So the serpent is basically what we were reading. The serpent over there is death, for example. The kingdom and that land that Narad Muni is talking about is nothing but your body. So when he says the city is destroyed, it's a city of 9 entrances, it's the body. So like this, he's kind of expressing and saying what it means of death. So the experience is, as I said, it's like of exiting you from your home. And at that time, the experience is not pleasurable. It's something that we do not want. Now there's a myth, and I would want to talk about that. So we, a lot of time, talk about, oh, rest in peace. We talk about, oh, such a person, so lucky, he left in peace. We cannot say that. As I said, the experience that a soul is having at the time of leaving the body, we cannot have that experience. What we are seeing is nothing but our bewilderment. So the experience that the soul is going to have is based on their own actions, their own karmas. We cannot experience that. We say the person, oh, silently in his sleep left, could mean a peaceful departure, could not mean it. We cannot say. Because a good example by which I can explain that is, you know how sometimes a capital punishment is given? And now there's this trend of a chemically induced death sentence. So what they do is basically, there are a series of 3 chemicals that they ingest into the body of the person being executed. So the first is basically, they make the person numb, cannot make any actions, cannot move, cannot say. It's kind of, but it does not mean the person does not feel anything. Then series of steps taken, and then the lethal injection is given by what causes the heart to stop. At that time, is the person not feeling anxiety? Is the person not feeling pain? He is, but it's just not able to express. So similarly, the pain could be so severe that the person physically, from a bodily person, state is so unconscious that is not able to express it, but the pain exists. So that's an unfortunate situation which we need to try and rectify, and that's what we're going to dive into real quick. But that experience by itself is not where it all ends. The journey after that moment of death is from where the journey starts for what's going to happen next. So it all starts with as soon as the soul is out of the body, right? The soul is going to hover in that area for a couple of hours, looking at the body itself and saying, I want to get in over there again. Now, without you having the body, you're not able to interact with the material world. You have what is called a subtle body, but not the gross body. Now you're trying and crying out, asking for help for all the relatives or anybody around you and saying, help me get back into my body. Help me. But nobody's able to hear. So that experience is traumatic. Because you're attached to what identity you took up during your life, you don't want to leave that. Right? Now, in this entire point, now you don't even have a body, so you don't have hands and you don't have a mouth, you don't have anything, you are not able to eat, but you're still hungry because you have a subtle body. It's still not in your pure spiritual identity where you're not suffered by hunger. So now, in a sense, you're dependent on your family members. So for those from an Indian background, from ritualistic, these rituals they've been seeing that. For the next couple of days, you do a pindadan. That pindadan is nothing but food for that departed soul so that they don't remain hungry. You're dependent on them to do all of those ritualistic processes so that you continue to not feel hungry. With all of that, what happens next is they're now that food that you're now offering helps them build that next body, which is the body that they're going to use for their journey. The next 1 year is going to be a journey to the place where you're going to be given justice, the Yamaloka, where Yamaraj is the one who's going to give you justice. Now, what is going to happen next? That 1 year of journey is where you're now constantly going to remember every action that you performed. This journey of yours could either be a pleasurable one or could be really, really difficult based on what you have done. That's the first most important criteria. Because if you have been doing things which is not good, not as per the scriptures, you're obviously going to be suffering more because your journey is literally being dragged. Otherwise, it could be a pleasurable journey where you have a vehicle on which you're being carried away and it's much more easier. In this entire 1 year of journey, you're going to be getting shade, places to rest, or you might not get, all based on what is happening, what you have done in your life. Plus, there's a concession. The concession that comes in is now you're again dependent on somebody else, is what is your family doing in these first 13 days especially. If your family is performing devotional service, like a lot of families they would do is they would read Bhagavad Gita and do some other similar spiritual activities. There is chanting happening, there is a lot of offering to Krishna that is happening, and all of that is happening. All that is nothing but giving more comfort to the soul for their journey. And then finally, when you reach Yamlok, that is where, based on your karma, it's being decided, okay, X number in your bad side, X number on your good side. For these bad sides, out of the 21, 28 hellish places you're going to go, burn that out. Then, okay, good side, you're going to a higher heaven, if you want to call it that ways. But on the higher planetary systems, enjoy the results of that, and then you're going to take birth again. The good and the bad don't nullify each other. You have to take the result of both of them. So, again, during this entire 1 year, so 1 year in this journey and even going forward, that is 1 year from our perspective. It's, okay, once the soul is departed, right? 1 year for us is 1 day for them when they are in the places where they're getting their karmas, right? So in the Vedic cultures, we do 2 offerings in an year. And so one is the Punyatithi, that anniversary. And then we do Shraddha. That's twice, that 2 meals that you're offering to Krishna first. And that prasadam to the departed soul, they get their meal for the day, 2 meals. That's how the Vedic system works. And that's why those ritualistic processes is highly recommended. And if you're giving them food versus you're giving them Krishna prasadam, that makes a huge difference to what they're going to be experiencing in their journey. And what we would be experiencing if we're dependent on any other living entities. So I'm going to skip because of the time, the reading that we wanted to do. But what I'm trying to come to with all of these aspects is the fact that your entire experience at the time of death and your journey afterwards is being dependent on what your family members are now doing. Are they offering you food and water? If they're not, then you're going hungry. If they are, you have at least the comfort of having some meal during your journey or not. If they are peacefully, there are certain things which is clearly a no doing when that mourning period is going on. But if they're doing such things, it only creates more suffering to the departed soul. The point I'm making is, with all of this, is you're heavily dependent on others. Ideally, you should not be in that position. And the art of living is going to be the fact of you taking the control of your own destiny, of your own journey in your own hands. Ensuring you're not dependent on all of these offerings if your family members are making or not, because with time, these ritualistic ceremonies that is being done by the Vedic scriptures is only dying. You cannot be dependent on somebody else to make sure you are going to be well situated. And before I go on to the details of how do we rectify all of these situations, The entire process of your pain does not just end with the death and your journey. You take birth again. And now, birth is something which we celebrate a lot. Okay, the process, oh, somebody's taken birth in your family, you got a child, now amazing, let's have a celebration. But that process of birth, why do we say the four most basic root problems of all your sufferings is birth, old age, disease, and death? Janam, Mara, Jara, Vyadhi. Those four, why is it called painful? Birth is celebratory. Like, so let's do a very quick reading again. Or what is the experience at the time of birth? Okay, now Vedic scriptures define everything very much in detail, and why we want to try and avoid having to take birth again. Let's just read that. We're reading from 331, starting verses 5 onwards. Can anyone help me out with reading? Thank you so much. Verse 5 to, where did I write it? Sorry, 5 to 10. What's on the screen right now?
The conditioned living entity is satisfied in his own particular species of life, while deluded by the covering influence of the illusory energy. He feels little inclined to cast off his body even when in hell, for he takes delight in hellish enjoyment. Text 6.
Sorry, my apologies. I'm on the wrong chapter. I skipped that one, sorry. I'm still looking at my notes. So 331 is what we wanted to do. 5 onwards, sorry. Verse 5 to 10, please. Thank you.
Deriving its nutrition from the food and drink taken by the mother, the fetus grows and remains in the abominable residence of stools and urine, which is breeding place of all kinds of worms. Text 6. Bitten again and again all over the body by the hungry worms in the abdomen itself, the child suffers terrible agony because of his tenderness. He thus becomes unconscious moment after moment because of the terrible condition. Text 6. Owing to his mother's eating bitter, pungent foodstuff or food which is too salty or too sour, the body of the child instantly suffers pain which are almost intolerable. Placed within the amnion and covered outside by the intestines, the child remains lying on one side of the abdomen, his head turned towards his belly and his back and neck arched like a bow. Text 9. The child thus remains just like a bird in a cage, without freedom of movement. At that time, if the child is fortunate, he can remember all the troubles of his past 100 births, and he grieves wretchedly. What is the possibility of peace of mind in that condition? Text 6. Thus endowed with the development of consciousness from the 7th month after his conception, the child is tossed downward by the airs that press the embryo during the weeks preceding delivery. Like the worms born of the same filthy abdominal cavity, he cannot remain in one place.
Thank you so much. So that's how the scriptures are defining. So one thing, if you might have noticed, the entire pregnancy period, that's Srimad Bhagavatam defining it far before than the modern medical sciences understood and realized that. That's we refer to the Vedic scriptures because the level of knowledge, the level of depth that we get from these Vedic scriptures is far greater because it's coming from the source, from the creator of everything. So what we read just now is the fetus when it's in the womb. It's not a pleasurable experience. Now imagine yourself being crammed into a small place where you're hardly able to move your limbs. Within a few minutes itself, it's going to be suffering for you. You would want to get out of that situation. For a fetus, that's 9 months if you're taking a human form of birth. So that's again an experience which we would not want to have. At this stage, the soul is like, oh man, how did I get up into this position again? And now they're remembering their lives and said, uh-oh, never did the right thing. Never understood the art of living so that I'm not coming in this constrained position again and again. And at this stage, the living entity is like, I'm not going to make that mistake again now. Enough is enough. and makes a promise to himself saying, I am now going to follow the rules and regulations and make conscious effort to understand my constitutional position and act accordingly so that I am liberated from this miserable situation of material world. But that does not happen, does it? We keep falling again and again into the same situation. Let's read along with 3 verses again. What is happening now? We look at a child, oh, so innocent, so nice. Oh, cutie, cutie. You know, we look at the child and we said, oh, so blissful life, having to do nothing, food is given, everything is taken care of, nothing. But what's in the actual consciousness of the child? That's verse 25 to 27 is going to describe. Would anybody like to read? Yeah, thank you.
Which text is that?
25 to 27.
After coming out of the abdomen, the child is given the care of persons who are unable to understand what he wants, and thus he is nursed by such persons. Unable to refuse whatever he is given to him, he falls into undesirable circumstances. Laid down on a foul bed, infested with sweat and germs, the poor child is incapable of scratching his body to get relief from his itching sensation, to say nothing of sitting up, standing, or even moving. In his helpless condition, gnats, mosquitoes, bugs, and other germs bite the baby, whose skin is tender, just as small worms bite a big worm. The child, deprived of his wisdom, cries bitterly.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your help over there. So we just saw, the entire, and that's why again and again we're talking about the fact that birth, old age, disease, death is something we do not want to go through again and again. Imagine being into a situation where you're not even able to scratch yourself when it's itchy. Try it. Next time when you're itchy, right? Take a few seconds. Don't scratch. You're going to feel so much of anxiety. No, I want to do it. As a child, you're never able to do that. Try going to a place where you're not speaking the native language. And over there, try to communicate to somebody and say, I'm trying to find a washroom right now. I really need to go. Right? Have you ever been in that situation? I have been when I was visiting France. Like everybody's speaking French. And I said, do you speak English? I said, no, we don't. I said, you just spoke English. I've experienced that fun. But in that situation where you're trying to communicate with somebody and you're not able to do that, imagine that situation. Right? We think it's blissful, but it's not. Now, I'm going to stop here with all of these conversations about sufferings, miseries, and stuff. I'm not going to be doing that part which a lot of these places are, all the religious places are infamous for doing, right? Now you know this suffering. Empty your pockets there in that donation box, or else you will suffer in these conditions ever and ever again. No, that's not the intention. The intention is not to scare. The intention is to say this is not what our constitutional position is. Our constitutional position is not that of suffering, and that is why we don't like these experiences. Our constitutional position is to be ever blissful, always happy, always full of knowledge. That's our constitutional position, and that's why all these experiences is not good. So now, how do we avoid all this? That's the biggest question and the most essence part of this entire conversation of ours. We talked about suffering, and I said in the beginning, in my apologies, I'm going to talk about suffering, but not with the intention to scare people around. The intention is that this is not what we want. Okay? So, how do we avoid all this situation? That's where the art of leaving is now going to start. Once we leave in the right manner, in the right circumstances, we're not going to be put into these suffering conditions again and again. So let's focus on that now. The first thing is going to be the influence of time itself. Okay, now the Vedic scriptures talk a lot about what it means to die at the right time. So what the Bhagavad Gita is saying, those who know the Supreme Brahman, attain that Supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of fear God in the light and at the auspicious moment of the day, during the fourth night of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. I don't think I have the astrological knowledge to be able to calculate based on this information or what is the time of death. That is good. So we do this. Recently, I've had a death in my family. And okay, by reading this verse, the first natural instinct, oh, the person died right when the Rohini Nakshatra started. Wonderful. Is everybody able to control when they're going to die? Is there anybody who can determine when they're going to die or be able to control, I'm going to not die now, but going to wait for 10 more minutes? It's a better astrological positionings of the planetary systems and it's going to be more auspicious for me to die 10 minutes later. Can we control that? Hey, driver, can you not hit me now? Just 10 minutes more? It's going to be better for me to have an accident at that time? No, we cannot. We cannot, for that matter, even control the time of birth. Despite the fact that we have C-sections available and we kind of, are saying, okay, not today, I would want to have my child to born and not tomorrow, whatever, right? Even then, the circumstances change and we are not able to achieve the time of birth also. Forget about time of death. Bhishma Dev is an example, and that's a picture about him, right? So he's the one who was blessed, who was given that blessing saying, you can decide when you're going to die. So he waited for the right auspicious moment, and we can read about that in Srimad Bhagavatam, that he waited for the right moment, he waited for Krishna to arrive over there, and in his presence did he quit the body. Not everybody is that lucky or has that kind of skills to be able to do that. So fine, an influence of time is there at the time of our death, which is but something which is not in our control. But what we talked about was to be taking control about the art of living. So this does not help, does it? No. Let's move on. Krishna says, Yam yam vapi smaranam bhavam. He's saying, whatever state of being you are when you quit your body. So whatever state of being, remembers when he quits, when his body, O son of Kunti, that state he attains without fail. Tam tam evati kaunteya. He's saying, whatever state of mind you are in at the time of your death, that is the state you're going to achieve. That's easier, right, than being able to control the time of your death. Whatever consciousness, whatever state of mind you have at the time of death is in your control. What are you thinking at the time of your death? That is in your control. The verse that we were reading, right, before. Now this king that we are talking about was remembering his wife at the time of death. So he attains the female form of body in his next birth. He becomes a woman because he's thinking of a woman at the time of death. There are many more examples. Bharat Maharaj, he quit his body, despite all his practices, he quit his body while remembering a deer. So he takes the birth of a deer in the next life. So whatever stage, and there are many examples that we can keep talking about. Obviously, when Krishna is saying it's obviously going to be true, but we also have in Bhagavatam a lot of such examples which are helping us to understand that this is a fact. So through all of these things, this is something that is at least in our control. And now, okay, so what should we be remembering at the time of death? What should we be thinking about at the time of death? That becomes the next question. So, because when we are saying when you will attain what you're going to be thinking about at the time of your death, so what should be your thinking process? Krishna says, Yanti Deva Vrita Devam. So if you are thinking about the Devas, the demigods, all of these amazing sun god, moon god, whatever, you're going to be living, you're going to take birth in their position, within them. He's saying, Pitra Yanti Pita Vrata. If you're thinking about your ancestors, the Pitras, you're going to take birth in that, within them. Bhutani Yanti Bhutejya. So even if you're thinking about ghostly things, then you're going to take birth in there. So the translation goes is, those who worship the demigods take birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. Those who worship the ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. But he's saying one more thing. And those who worship me will live with me. So, what's wrong with living with your ancestors? What's wrong with going and living in the moon planet or the sun planet, if I'm remembering the sun god or moon god at the time of death? We, throughout the life, all NASA's, all the other people are trying to reach moon, Mars, all these different places. Such an easy way. There's a small book where you can try and get a copy of that, Easy Journey to Other Planets. So that's what, oh, awesome, thank you. So there's a book called Easy Journey to Other Planets. That's what that book is talking about, saying you just think of that place when you're dying and you attain that place. Such an easy way to travel to these different planetary systems. But Krishna also says, Abrahma bhuvanan loka punaravartino arjuna mamupetya tu kaunteya punarjanma na vidyate. He's saying, from the highest planet in the material world to the lowest are all places of misery. Because in all of these places, you will continuously have birth, old age, disease, and death. And we just talked about why that is painful. So irrespective of even if you're living with your ancestors, living in the Swargaloka, living anywhere, even becoming Brahma, the highest of all these planetary systems, you're still going to take birth again, going to die, and going to suffer through all of those things that we just talked about. So what do we conclude by that? You're not supposed to be thinking about demigods, the different planetary leaders, or what, right? And or talking about your ancestors, thinking about spirits, ghosts, the universe, whatever, right? That's not what we're supposed to be thinking about. We're supposed to be thinking about Krishna at the time of death. And that is how we will attain Krishna. And he's clearly saying that it is going to happen. So Krishna is also saying, Antakale chamam evam smarana mukta kalevaram yaha prayati sa madbhavam yanti nashti atra samshaya. And whosoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Nashti atra samshaya. There is no doubt about it. So once he said you're going to attain what you think about at the time of death, but he adds another words on top of it and says, if you think of me, you're coming to me for sure. There's guarantee of that. Right? So when we are remembering Krishna, we attain Krishna, we attain the spiritual world, which does not come under the definition of that highest planetary in the material world to the lowest, where birth, old age, disease, and death is going to happen. So that is how we're going to get out of the miseries. But now here's one more thing which is very important to understand. Remembering of Krishna at the time of death, you attain everything that you need to. So why are we in the temple right now? All we need to do is do that one small act. We see in Srimad Bhagavatam that Ajamil at the time of death just said Narayan, and he was helped out by the Narayan Dutas at that time. Right? So, why can't we do that? Ever given an exam? Any type of exam? Maths exam, physics, whatever, right? Whatever we have studied or are studying. We cannot just sit at the time of the examination and think we would be able to solve all the problems during that examination time. We cannot do that, right? We have to practice, so that we have come to a point where it is our natural instinct to be able to solve all these mathematical problems, physics, numericals, whatever accounting problems you deal with, right? So till when you're not practiced, at the time of death, you cannot remember Krishna. It is not possible. Because the moment of death is so scary under normal circumstances, it's so fearful. When the Yamadutas arrive, they are so fearful. The Bhagavatam again and again describes them coming in with ropes, tying you up and dragging you out of the body, and all their looking is so fearful. It's not possible if you've not practiced. So the entire life of ours is supposed to be nothing but a practice session for us to be able to remember Krishna. So now here is how you can do a dipstick test right now. In your entire day today, how many times did you remember Krishna? In this entire week, how many times did you remember Krishna? So in this week of yours, put in a lot of different scenarios in front of you saying, I'm cooking, I'm taking a bath, I'm studying, I'm driving, something, right? All of are the different situations that you have gone through in that entire week. In how many of those situations have you practiced to remember Krishna? Not much. And we talked about that can come at any time. You're driving, you can meet with an accident and die at that moment of time. So if you're not practiced remembering Krishna while driving, then you will not be able to remember Krishna if you die at the time of an accident, and so on and so forth. People slip in their bathrooms and die. So your entire art of living, and that's where I said the similarity is going to be, your art of living is a practice for art of living. If you understand the objective that we have to live the way by remembering Krishna, then you practice for that the entire life. Okay? So we cannot be as lucky as Ajamil was. It's not possible for us to utter that pure Krishna's name so purely at the time of death that everything else is forgotten, what we have done, and we attain the perfection. So we talked about all the miseries of death. But let's also talk about, if you attain this position that you wanted to attain, what is the difference? At that time, death is nothing more than just an event of like you changing clothes. There is no pain. There is no suffering. And that is what we want to attain, right? There are so many examples that we have in the entire scriptures. Dhruv Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, all of them when they're dying, they're actually being welcomed in a sense. For them, death is not fearful. The death is just standing in front of them, joining their hands and saying, it's time. Can you please hurry a little bit? It's time to go. They cannot even force a devotee to say, okay, out. They cannot. So, for the difference, and the picture over here, which is amazing, is an analogy that Srila Prabhupada again talks about, is the mouth of a lion or lioness is the same. But the experience that a deer is going to have when its neck is in that mouth is going to be very different from the experience that a kitten is going to be having when the kitten's mother is carrying the kitten in its mouth. There's a huge difference in that feeling, right? That mouth is that of death. For a devotee, the experience is that of a kitten. I'm surrendered to Krishna. I'm just hanging in over there. Take me wherever you want to. I'm fine. I know you're doing whatever you're doing in my best interest. I'm fine. I'm good. For a deer, oh, I'm losing everything. Attachments, strings breaking one by one. I'm losing everything. I'm going to die. That is an experience that you don't want. Right? So that's the difference. So the conclusion, or what I wanted to come to the point, is the fact, as I mentioned, is your art of living, what you're doing as your act of living is nothing more than a practice session for you to be able to attain that position, that consciousness. If you're constantly practicing, chanting every day, reading every day, doing all of the things that our scriptures suggest, what Srila Prabhupada has given us as a program, then you're training yourself to be able to win every situation and being able to remember Krishna at every situation. So when we are saying that there is danger at every step, that death can come at any moment of time, you've practiced to be able to remember Krishna in every situation. When you're ill, you're chanting. When you're doing something else, like driving, you're still remembering Krishna, maybe listening to a kirtan, and so on and so forth. No matter what situation you face at the time of death, you'll still be able to remember Krishna because you've practiced it well. We just have last 5 minutes, and that brings me to my final point over here. Because we talked about in the beginning that we lost our loved ones. And now when we are talking and heard, when it's a pretty natural tendency then when we are talking about and listening about things such as what is the suffering that a soul goes through when they depart, we think about all these living family members of ours and we think about them, right? What would they have felt? Did I do things right or wrong? Did I make sure that I gave them the comfort that I should have given or not? So if we feel that out of compassion that we need to do things for the favor of these living entities, we have to again refer to Srimad Bhagavatam. There are innumerable examples again. So we look at when Prahlad Maharaj left, when Dhruv Maharaj left. And so there is specifically a verse that Nrsimhadev says to Prahlad Maharaj, and he says, who is not aware of that Leela of Nrsimhadev? Anybody who's not aware? Awesome. So, Prahlad Maharaj had to bear a lot of sufferings because of his father's attitude towards it. So, Prahlad Maharaj knew that all the things that his father did was irreligious, and he's going to go through all of those suffering because of that. So out of compassion, he's asking Nrsimhadev, saying, can you please forgive my dad? I know he did wrong things. That's the compassion a devotee feels always, right? Can you please just let him off with a smaller punishment or not so much of suffering? And that's why Nrsimhadev says, he says, because you were born in this family, 14 generations, 7 before, 7 after, are all going to be achieving the same destiny as you are, which is the highest level. So if we are feeling compassionate about the loving members of our family who have left and did not get an opportunity to be able to remember Krishna at the time of departure, make sure you remember. Make sure you practice your life completely surrendered to Krishna, remembering Krishna at every moment of time, because when you are doing that, you're also benefiting not only your previous generations, but also generations coming in future. That's the best thing that you can give to your child. That's the best thing that you can give to your father, grandfather, whosoever has departed, right? So the practice of Krishna consciousness, that is why it's called as the highest achievement, because you have not only achieved something for yourself, which is unachievable otherwise, you've achieved it for your family members, and in that entire act, you have also become such an amazing first-class citizen, as Srila Prabhupada says, that you've also helped your society. You've also served your society when you're serving Krishna. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that one who, so when you're doing the practice of Krishna consciousness, the pleasure that you derive from a small pond is there in the pleasure that you're going to be deriving from a bigger pond of water. So it's like, I give you a $5 bill versus I give you a $20 bill. The pleasure that a $5 bill gives you is also included in the $20 bill. So when we are serving Krishna, we actually do end up serving every family member of ours, the entire society, and that is why it's called the highest of position to have, and that's why a devotee is so much respected by Krishna himself also. So that was my seminar for today, my session, my talk for today. We have 5 minutes. We can take questions or comments that anyone can have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sudarshan Prabhu, for such a wonderful discourse. Anyone has any questions and reflections?
Hare Krishna Prabhu,
Hare
thanks
Krishna.
for class. Just have a little doubt. You said like 14 generation will get liberated. So Hiranyakashipu, when he left his body, he was in mode of ignorance.
He would in what, sorry?
He was in mode of ignorance, right? When he left his body. So does the verse means like eventually in his future birth he will take up bhakti and then he will get liberated, or at once he'll get liberated?
No. So Hiranyakashipu in particular is a very special case. We know that. Right? So let me first clarify Hiranyakashipu and then we can go on to the others. Hiranyakashipu is a devotee. Okay, so first we'll just boil down to things, right? So he is of course going back to Krishna for sure. He's just playing that role of his enemy because that's the service he was given. Part 2, even if he was not, he was killed by Krishna. He was killed in the presence of Krishna. Irrespective, he's going back. The presence of Krishna is the highest achievement that you can have. Even if that was not the case, because he had a devotee son, irrespective, he will attain the same position as his son, which is his liberated. We're not talking about a favorable birth where you would be able to practice Krishna consciousness. He's liberated. Okay? But yes, if you are a devotee who's still practicing, come to a certain level, and through your association you have taught your family members also the practice of Krishna consciousness, they will all, along with you, attain a birth which is going to be favorable for your completion of the Krishna consciousness journey. You will not lose any practice that you have done in this life. Does that help?
Do you think that it counteract the fact that Krishna says, like, with whatever nature one leaves the body?
Krishna never says anything false. There's no contradiction in his statements. It's just our level of knowledge and understanding. So, the consciousness, let me explain it this way. When you are with a friend of yours, and that friend has an influence on you, you think like your friend. So when Hiranyakashipu was being killed by Narasimhadev at that time, he has been in the association of his son, a devotee. He might not realize it, that's Agyata Sukriti, he might not realize it, but he's thinking of Krishna, he's thinking of Vishnu at the time of his death. He did. He might be like Kamsa, he might be thinking unfavorably, I have to kill him, I have to kill him, I have to kill him, but he's thinking. Even that counts. That's how merciful Krishna is. Does that help? You still seem to have a question. Okay. Anybody else?
Anyone else
Any
like
comment?
to share any reflections, comments?
Like you said that Krishna is very merciful. If we take the case of Putna, Putna also had another intentions, but because she came there to feed Krishna, Krishna thinks that she is also my mother, even
Yeah.
though she's there to kill him. So,
Absolutely. That's a wonderful
yeah.
example. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. Yes. So Putana achieving the position of mother in the spiritual world was just because she offered milk to Krishna. She might have done that with the intention to kill him, but that does not count. Krishna says, you offered me milk. That's how merciful he is. So yeah. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming and joining us here for the discourse. We're going to have these discourse every Saturday from 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. and we're going to have new topics every Saturday. So you're most welcome to come every Saturday and join us. Also, we have some wonderful spiritual books if you might want to have a look. And we have this small little cute piggy. If you want to donate anything from your heart, we'll be more grateful. Yeah, that's all. We're just going to have 8 p.m. Aarti, Shayan Aarti. I would recommend everyone to stay because in this Aarti, the Kirchar Gopinath, he is in his night clothes. So it's nice if you stay. Otherwise, thank you so much again for coming. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.